God has spoken. So let the church say amen. It's amazing how all of this is just about responding to him. Even if you're coming into church and it seems like what God's dealing with is the person next to you and not you, he's still talking to you. Amen. Amen. This whole thing has always been about how we respond to him. That what our reaction is, what we choose to pursue in life, how we choose to respond, it's all in how we are responding to him. And we're going to be looking at several different types of people and an interaction here today. There's probably a well-worn place in your Bible. You've probably read this quite a few times. So as we go through it, we're going to try to go through it in a way that doesn't let your eyes gloss over or oh yeah, I know that, I've heard that story 10,000 times. But we're going to be in Luke 8 today. We'll really start in verse 40, but we'll probably back up in a second. And it says, "And it came to pass that when Jesus was returned, the people gladly received him, for they were all waiting for him." And so we're sort of in the middle of two different interactions. And for Jesus, he's going from one interaction to the other. He's going from one group of people to another group of people. So I want to just say where he's coming from, and then we'll get to where he's going to. But he's just coming from having dealt with the demoniac of the Gadarenes. So he's just come from the way that we're going to look at this today. We're looking at this in terms of how people respond to Jesus as Jesus is ministering to them. So the first person that we've got to interact with today is this demoniac from Gadarene, who, if you've ever had any interaction with the spiritual, with sin and the demonic presences and all of that, you know there's sort of just a progression that usually happens of just normal sin, and then what we'll call oppression, where you just can't get away from the attacks and the onslaughts of thoughts, and it affects our emotions, our ability to think, so it just sort of drives you a little bit nuts. It's just oppressive is the word, and that the longer you go in oppression, it gets to a possession, where they actually take over, and that's where this man had been. He had been in, as we're not going to go through that story, but he was possessed by a group that called itself Legion. And he was one of those, he would go in and he would cut himself and he would torture himself, and he was unable to be held captive or contained by any of the people in the area. He was sort of relegated to a sideshow attraction. You ever see one of those old circus type freak shows? Come see the giant woman or the bearded woman or the tiny man or the world's smallest horse or all of those things. That's all this society could basically do with him, was sort of keep him somewhat contained. They couldn't keep him bound in shackles because he'd break out and he'd hurt himself. It would just sort of be like, come see this demoniac man. And so he'd gotten so far to the place that he needed to be set free. He needed to be released from all of this torture and all of this possession he's going through. But the state that he was in, he had zero ability in and of himself to even ask for help. So here we see Jesus coming to the man who had zero ability to seek help on his own, and he went to go and set the captive free, so to speak. The one who couldn't even say, "God help me," was the one that God came and helped. And he immediately came in and he helped in the way that Jesus always does. He came in and he spoke. He came in and he didn't even speak to the demoniac. He immediately went in and he spoke to the demons. And he commanded them and said, "Get out." And then he had this whole interaction with Legion while he's over there recovering somewhere. And that's starting in verse 26 and goes on to 40 if you want to read that on your own. But the the point that we want to start out with today is the first person we're going to be interacting with is somebody who could not seek help for themselves. And so Jesus sought them out to set them free. And then, so just imagine, this was not an unknown person. This is not something that was done in secret. This was not, he didn't go to the haunted house near the block and sort of deal in secret with the big dark house that all the kids dare themselves to run into, but nobody's actually willing to go into. He didn't just go set this thing free that was out of the public eye. It was right in the middle of town square, so to speak. This was a very public setting free. And so, as things that are done publicly, you have to see the reaction to them. And the reaction from the man who was set free is the reaction that you would expect. Don't leave me. Stay right here. And he recognized the one who had done this, who had come and set him free in a way that was more than he could have ever even dreamed of being set free, but even more, he couldn't have even sought it out. And all of a sudden, he was free and he was bound. And he was looking at the one who set him free, and he doesn't ever want to leave his presence. He goes, I remember what happened when I was on my own. I got led all the way down into this possession thing. I don't want to be alone again. Come and stay with me. And Jesus said, Jesus had other places to go, but he said, go and tell of what's happened here. And so he went about and he told of all the great things that Jesus had done for him. But the one who was set free is not the only one who had to deal with Jesus setting him free. There was this whole other crowd. And we see that interaction in verse 37. It said, the whole multitude of the country of the Gadarenes, everybody, the entire city knew what had happened, round about and besought him to depart from them, for they were taken with great fear. That means that the entire town treated Jesus more like the demons treated Jesus than the one who was set free. That there was more in common between Legion and the town of the Gadarenes. Sort of answers the question of how did a man get possessed in this country? If the entire people of the country have more of a demonic perspective on life than a God-fearing perspective on life. But here they are, they just looked at a man who was in the most torment you can possibly be in outside of getting killed. And he just saw a man who is in such great torment get set free. Yeah. And their response was not, if he can set that guy free, what can he do for me? That's not their response. That you would think that if you had troubles in your life, if you had a cold, and you saw the person next to you have cancer getting healed, wouldn't you look and go, wow, if that God can heal her cancer, he can take care of my cold. But no, he just ruined their entire economic way of life. Between the pigs that the Legion went into and ran off the cliff and their little sideshow with the demoniac, he just came in and just ruined their economic system. He just caused a stir, so to speak. And it was more problematic for them to have God in their midst than it was for them to have a possessed person in their midst. Yeah. It was more problematic for there to be healing and freedom than it was for there to be bondage. As long as they could somewhat feel in control and use their bondage, they would much prefer that to the presence of a holy God. But their reaction didn't change the reaction of the man who had been set free. He just wanted Jesus to stay, no matter how crazy the rest of the town looked to him now. And he was probably one that was right in there with him, way back before his possession. But now how crazy they must have looked to stare right in the face of one who could set him so free and want him to leave. And so that's where we're coming from. Jesus having just pursued the one who was unable to ask for help for himself. And it says, and it came to pass that when Jesus was returned, the people gladly received him, for they were all waiting for him. And we can just speculate on why it was they were waiting for him. We always tend to read the best in the people as if they were gladly waiting for him because of holy reasons. We're not told, so we'll move on from that. But they were waiting for him for more than likely wanting to get something out of him. Maybe Jesus was the next sideshow. It says, and behold, there came a man named Jairus, and he was a ruler of the synagogue. And he fell down at Jesus' feet and besought him that he would come into his house. So Jairus, a ruler of the synagogues were the little churches, so to speak, outside and around the temple where the word of God was preached. And they had quite a few positions in the synagogue. The ruler was not the minister. He wasn't the preacher. He wasn't the one who would do the teaching. That would be in this time period. I'm not sure if they called themselves rabbis yet, but they were at least the ministers and the head. The ruler is what we would call maybe the head deacon. He's the one that made sure the whole place ran smoothly. He was in charge of making sure that church functioned. And he was in that time, he would be considered a godly man who loved the church and loved God and was wanting to make sure everything would just happen, function smoothly. Everything that was needed for services would be there when they were needed. All the cleanup would happen afterwards. All the people would walk in the way they needed to walk in, walk out the way they needed to walk out, just to make the church function. He was the ruler of the synagogue. And here he comes and he falls down at Jesus' feet and tries to get him to come to his house. And we find out why. It says, for he had only one daughter, about 12 years of age, and she lay dying. We find out in one of the other Gospels that he describes her as his only little daughter. Precious one. And we find that we don't find out what she's dying of. We just find out that she's dying. And we're going to look at these in both the human, physical, but also the spiritual thing that's going on here at the same time. That you can imagine, I grew up with her, maybe remembering all the fun times he's had with her, the in-jokes, carrying on her back, all the different just father-daughter things that are going on. And you probably saw her have that first cough. Oh, that'll get taken care of. And just going up to the place where he realizes that death's coming. Can't do anything about it. We got to go to the healer. We got to go to the only one who could possibly heal him. Because if Jesus wasn't here, we've tried all the physicians. We've tried all of the priests to pray over him. We've tried all the different things. And it's just coming to the time where there's nothing else we can do. And daughter's dying. So we're going to come to Jesus and we're going to ask him, would you come? How does it say? He besought him that he would come to his house. Perhaps to lay hands on his daughter. Perhaps he would just need to speak to him. He wasn't quite the centurion's level of faith yet where he could just say, oh, if you would just say the word, I know it would happen. But he knew if he would come, just his presence, and however he would manifest his presence, it would be enough to heal his daughter. Have you ever needed to pray for somebody like that? Where you just saw the end coming, and you couldn't handle it, so you needed your God. And that's just in the physical. That's the human story that's going on. But there's one on top of that. She's 12 years of age. There's what I didn't describe of my little daughter. There's a play of words so much on that in terms of the age and maturity. That there was a term that was used for children under 12. No, my little one, basically. My little daughter or my little son. And it was a childhood term. And then after they were 12 and they'd get to 13, It would no longer be my little daughter, but it would be my young woman. And we know that just humanly in that time, God gives us so many physical parallels to the spiritual. And we know that, at least back in this time, would have been the average age of, first menstruation, at first, the maturing of the body. What it also would have been that description of the application of the curse, of the time when there's been 12 years of innocence, so to speak. Not sinlessness, not as if we're born sinless and then somehow at this magic age of 12 or 13, then all of a sudden you become a sinner. No, you were born a sinner. And that sin was always there, and you always have to deal with the discipline, and you always have to deal with the teaching. You have to, they have this childhood version of guilt and all of these things. But you get to a point where the accountability and the responsibility and the knowledge of the sin is there, and in the human, it's like we get this picture type of the curse just landing. And in every aspect of even biological life that's supposed to produce life, we find that area of the biological life that's supposed to produce life begins to produce death. And so we find this physical example of the curse that happened in the fall. And so we have this time period where even if she wasn't dying, he know that she's coming up on this time where the curse is getting ready to be applied. The innocence is about to be gone. She's no longer going to be my little girl. She's about to be a young woman. I see it coming. I can't stop it. Because up to this point, I've been able to take care of them. It's been my faith that's covered. It's been me taking them to the doctor. It's been me dealing with them. She's about to have to be accountable for herself. We had one daughter. She was about to die. Pastor Jonathan's not the only one that cries. That's right. About 12 years of age. And as he went, the people thronged him. You can almost get a picture of somebody going out and selling popcorn and drinks. The Frias truck coming by. Got a group of people going, miracle's about to happen. I'm going to get to witness it. We're going to be the crowd that's going to actually see something happen. They don't care about the girl. Right? They don't care about Jairus. They don't care about the fact that Jairus cares about his girl. They just want to see something interesting happen. They want to be around when the sideshow does its thing. But this isn't a sideshow. God deals personally with individuals. So we see this time, and it's interesting where that time of the rise of accountability, the rise of the personal knowledge with sin, is that same time of the rise of the presence of the curse and how the curse just gets applied. And he sees it coming. And there's nothing the Father can do other than kneel down at the feet of Jesus. Say, save my daughter. Don't let her go home yet. You come to my home. Make my home your home. So if you come here, we don't have to leave. She won't have to go anywhere. I hope both of them physical, because she was physically dying. But for all of us, because we all reach that age where you're going to have to deal with your sin on your own. The question is you deal with your sin on your own? Are you taking care of it yourself? Or are you running to the feet of Jesus? Because just like he could see that first cough, maybe the fever coming up, maybe a little bit of delirium, maybe she just just started not quite being the daughter that he always knew. He probably started seeing signs of, oh yeah, there's some, I heard her lie this morning, but she didn't just have to be corrected by me. And she wasn't just guilty because I've taught her not to lie. That guilt hung on just a little bit longer. Started seeing smaller signs of an awakening and accountability. And knowing that, that process is coming, just like that physical maturation is coming, just like every disease has its end, just like all of those other picture types of this situation, that there's coming a day where the guilt that you're going to experience is not going to just go away after you've dealt with your human punishment, or after you've stopped being grounded, but the guilt is no longer going to be something that you're taught to deal with, but it's going to come from you because God's talking to you. Because God's showing you that it wasn't just something for your parents to take care of with you. This is something you've got to take care of with me. This is something that if you don't come to me, you're going to die. And as he went, all the people thronged him. And a woman having an issue of 12 years, which has spent all her living upon physicians, neither could be healed of any, came behind him and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her issue of blood stanched. It's almost like we've started a different story, but he's on his way to Jairus' house, and the masses thronged him, and they're coming to see this miracle that he's going to do. And then we have this little interlude where this woman, who for 12 years has had an issue of blood. Now, don't overlook the fact that this little girl is 12 years old, and she's had this issue for 12 years. We've already described the female monthly situation being this picture type of the applied curse, where death and corruption comes out of the place that life is supposed to come from. You may answer that question why why the apostle describes that salvation comes through childbirth, not because you get saved by having a child, but because it is that one moment where you're allowed to actually do what you were created to be able to do, is bring forth life instead of bring forth corruption. And you get a little bit of taste of it. But here she was, 12 years, the entire time this girl has been alive. I don't know how big this area was. I don't know how much of an overlap this synagogue life was with where this woman lived. I don't know if the two were aware of each other or not. I don't know if she knew who Jairus was, knew who the daughter was, but for the same amount of time that Jairus has been raising this girl, she's been dealing with not just the curse, but an overabundance of the curse that she can't escape. Not just your normal, common, everyday sin and curse, but one that's overtaken her life and overrun her life for 12 years. Just think about that for a second. 12 years. I don't know if this happened right when she became a young woman, and so she might be in her mid-20s and has never known anything else but the overabundance of the curse. She might be in her mid-30s where she's known most of her adult life being underneath the curse, but maybe had a small amount of time where it wasn't overtaking her life. But we know this, it's stolen any hope she's had of marriage. It's stolen any chance she's had of having her own children. It's stolen any chance that she's had of having a normal life. What society would consider a normal life, of getting married, having children, setting up a household. No, because this very issue would be something that would make her considered unclean. So much so that if you were to go back into Numbers and Deuteronomy, it described that not only would she be considered unclean, but anything she touched would then become unclean enough to make anybody else who then touched it after her, for them to become unclean. So here we have this picture of the curse being applied. And there's just, let's stick with the human for just a second. No marriage, no deep personal relationships, isolated by yourself. 12 years. Without any hope of actually being able to have those deep, intimate relationships. That she's gone through, and she's not just sucked it up. She's used all of the money she's ever gotten. She's tried to go from physician to physician, treatment to treatment, and tried to get it taken care of in every way imaginable. You might see somebody who's gone from doctor to doctor for cancer or for mental illness, or it's just something that has come in and just has completely overtaken their life in an oppressive way that's kept them isolated and distant from everyone around them, knowing that they're walking through this life alone and they're never going to be able to get all the joy out of life. And they see everybody else walking through. Everybody else seems to have a family and is happy. Everybody else seems to have times where they're able to be intimate. And everybody else is able to actually have physical contact with people without causing them harm. Everybody else has this life, and it's been taken away from me for 12 years. The entire time this girl's living, I wonder if she was around and she would see Jairus giving his daughter those piggyback rides, and knowing that she'll never be able to give anybody one of those, that she'd never be able to hold somebody, or because she had an issue with blood. That curse was not just active and applied in her life, but it had taken over. Sin had just taken over her life, so much so that there was no satisfaction from sin anymore. There was just the constant isolating oppression from all of sin. And then we have the spiritual aspect of that as well. Just the curse having been applied and can't escape it, can't get away from it. And she came behind him and touched the border of his garment. We don't have this in America, but if you go back into Numbers and Deuteronomy, it describes this border that was supposed to be made, and it was sort of a ball knot tassel looking thing that would go all the way around, and it was designed to remind of two very important things. It was designed to remind of the commandments of the Lord. It was designed, which we know was the description of righteousness, which was the description of the character of God, of holiness, which was the description of the lifestyle that they were supposed to live under and through. But it was not just the reminder of the commandments of God. It was the reminder to avoid idols. It was the fidelity reminder. It was the reminder of who it was that loves them. It reminds them of who their husbandman was, where their relationship was. It reminded them of intimacy, and it reminded them of, what's the opposite of idolatry? Faithfulness. It reminded them of a faithfulness between them and their God, and the commandments that were an outflow of that. It was, if you love me, keep my commandments. And you just see the close, and it was written all the way around the hymn, if you love me, keep my commandments. If you love me, keep my commandments. And she comes up and she just touches him in that place of the reminder of faithfulness. Now, if you've heard what I've said so far, you're going to hear that there's absolutely nothing right about what she did. All right? If you're sitting here trying to figure out what the right way to come to Jesus is, you're going to miss it. All right? Because remember, she was a woman for the past 12 years who had lived the life of being publicly unclean, unable to enter into the temple, unable to interact in no social relationships, no intimacy. She'd be one of those people, she's one step removed from just being a leper, where she'd have to announce unclean, unclean, and stay away from people because To be close to people would mean to drag them down with her. And so this unclean woman who is an outcast in society just barrels into, what did it say? And the people thronged him, ran into the crowd of people that she's supposed to be avoiding. And doesn't even matter how many people she's going to take down with her, she's getting to Jesus. And she finds this, the only person in the history of the world who she can touch, and his holiness would make her clean, as opposed to her uncleanness making his holiness filthy. And with faith, it didn't matter. See, the Gadarene couldn't do this. The Gadarene couldn't have sought Jesus out because of his possession. The daughter needed a father to seek him out for her. But she was seeking him out for herself. Yeah. Because she's gone from physician to physician. She's lived all of the life that is supposed to be lived in a close, intimate relationship, childbearing, family building, all of the different normal, natural things that were supposed to be a part of her life. Because of sin, because of the overwhelming amount of sin, spiritually speaking, that it removed her from all of that. It wasn't just the curse, but it was the curse over and abundant, just ruling her life. And she had to get to Jesus. No matter what it took, no matter what rules had to be broken, no matter what laws had to be bypassed, no matter how many people it angered, no matter how many people had to spend the next week going through all their cleansing ceremonies and their sacrifices, no matter what it meant to anybody else, she had to get to Jesus. Knowing that it was going to mean all that for a lot of people, she had to get to Jesus, because this issue of blood, she's lived with it for 12 years. How many more could she stand to live with it with? She came behind him and touched that place of the reminder of the faithfulness of God, the reminder of the holiness of God, the reminder of the fact that our God is not a distant God, but is an ever-present God who deals with his people personally and through the Word, through all of the good things of life that are designed. All of the laws were designed in order to outline all the good things of life and how to keep them precious. You never looked to the law that way, did you? How to be given the good things of life and to keep them precious. Keep them away from the corrupting power of sin that would seek to take every good thing from God and tear it down to our own lustful desires. But no, it's the good things of God being protected by the holiness of God. And that place of faithfulness between God and man, she just came in and touched. In faith that if I would just touch the hem of his garments, he can make me whole. He could take this curse that's been ruling my life for forever and just make it go away, make me clean. She came behind him and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her issue of blood stanched. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" Not because he didn't know. Not because she somehow was able to get the sneaky healing without God realizing that she was stealing the healing from God. He knew. He knew she was coming up. He healed her through her touching the thing, not because she was able to sneak one past Jesus and get healed whether he was willing to or not. No. He touched him because this isn't just a situation about getting something from God. It's not good enough for you to God. It's not good enough to God for you to get the things that he would give you. He needs to give it to himself. He needs you to know that he's interacted with you, so that you're not responding to what he's done. You're responding to him. When all denied, Peter and they that were with him said, "Master, the multitude throng thee." See how many people? Probably not that one 3 rows deep eating the popcorn, but it's who is it going to be? The multitude throng thee and press thee, and sayest thou, "Who touched me?" Jesus says, somebody hath touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me. My goodness has been applied to somebody else. No, with all of the goodness that I have applied it to somebody. And they think that they've taken my virtue. But they need to know that I've given them my virtue. And when the woman saw that she was not hid, she came trembling and falling down before him. She declared unto him before all the people for what cause she had touched him, and how she was healed immediately. Oh, what a testimony. There's not a dry eye in the church that you can imagine. I can only imagine. We're not told, so I have to imagine. I'm really hoping that the multitude that thronged Jesus did not respond to Jesus healing this young woman the same way that the Gadarenes responded to the Gadarene being set free. I would really hope that their response was not, what, you let this unclean woman get this close to us? Get out of here. We're not told their response. I would hope that it would have been more of a, well, we didn't have to make it all to Jairus' house to see a miracle. No, I would have hoped it would have been, this is the man that I need to follow because look at what he can do. Look at the curse that he just removed from this person, this isolation, the consequences of sin, all of the way that this person has just been beaten down and oppressed and isolated and corrupted by sin. It's just gone now. She's alive. If she was a lame person, she'd probably be up and dancing. But with what she's dealing with, she's probably more close to washing his feet with her tears. Same reaction, just different interaction. And he said unto her, Daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith has made thee whole. Go in peace. Then we continue back to the main story. It says, While he yet spake, there cometh one from the ruler of the synagogue's house, saying unto him, Thy daughter is dead. Trouble not the master. What a news to get. You just saw such a miraculous healing. Maybe even in the spiritual description of Jairus' daughter's coming of age, curse application. Maybe he was even looking at this young woman and goes, well, if he can cure the end of the curse, perhaps he can take care of the beginning of it. Yes. That at least my daughter has a dad to seek out God for her, so that it can happen before the curse takes over her life. Because I don't want the curse I don't even want the curse to take over her life in the normal basic way, but especially not the way that it got applied to this young woman. The amount of years between that first application, what's it called, bat mitzvah, the first becoming a young woman application of the curse to the time when she's set free from it. I want that to be as short as possible, because we see it coming, and we don't know how close she is to even being aware of it happening for herself yet. But there's going to come a day when that conviction strikes and she realizes that, wait, I feel guilty for this, not because somebody else pointed out my sin, and not just because I know I did wrong. God's drawing me. Oh, God, save me. But here, he gets news that his daughter was dead. The worst news that he could have gotten at that moment. But when Jesus heard it, he answered him, saying, Fear not, believe only, and she shall be made whole. You can imagine the reaction was somewhere between Mary getting upset that Jesus was late and Lazarus had already died and being so distraught over that. You can imagine the reaction was somewhere between there and the fear and anger of the Gadarene. Just somewhere in that mix of God's presence here, my life is still destroyed. Or had he not dealt with this young woman and he had come home, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And you can imagine all of the thoughts ranging from the sorrow and the grief to the anger and the hostility to the blame and the depression, just circles and mixes. And you can imagine he was having what we would modern describe as one of those bipolar grief things where you don't know whether to blame somebody or break down into tears. And Jesus spoke to him because he had to speak to him before he could go to his daughter. Fear not, believe only, because you just saw me heal this woman. Yeah. I can raise your daughter. Fear not, believe only, because know that, in the spiritual sense, as soon as that curse gets applied, any healing's a resurrection anyway. There isn't a difference for Jesus between healing and resurrecting, because any sickness is death to him. To someone who's only known life and creation, anything less than holy, overflowing life is death to him. So he comes, and sickness and death is taken care of in the same way. He went up to the Gadarene and he spoke. The young woman came to him, and it wasn't enough for her to be healed. He had to have a time where he could speak to her, because it wasn't about the touching of the hem of his garment. It was about her hearing him speak to her. Not just speak, but speak to her. And now Jairus needs something. And it's not good enough for him just to give him what he needs. He has to speak to him so that he can respond to the spoken voice of his Savior. Yeah. Fear not, believe only, and she shall be made whole. And I said it here before, I said it again, the promise means nothing apart from the one who gives the promise. You cannot believe a promise if you don't believe the promiser. Any promise given from somebody you can't trust and believe promise is not worth anything. So in order to believe that she can be made whole, he had to believe in the one who said he would be made whole. She would be made whole. And when he came to the house, he suffered no man to go in, save Peter, James, and John, and the father and the mother of the maiden. And all wept and bewailed her. Now, we would like to think that this is a funeral service that we would know that all of the people loved this girl so much that they were just in grief. Excuse me. That's not what this is going on. In the time, they would have hired mourners. All right, these are actors pretending to flail around and mourn and make a big scene to describe how much of the love for this daughter was in the parents. They may not even be able to publicly display. So they get somebody else to publicly display it while they deal with what's going on. So all wept and bewailed her. You can just see all the flamboyant grief going on, a display of grief going on. Let me say it that way. It says, weep not, she's dead, or she's not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed him to scorn. It doesn't matter what he said. Jesus spoke. Yeah. And his response was to laugh him to scorn. Mm-hmm. So, what have we had so far? Jesus spoke, and the demons feared and listened. Jesus spoke, and the men of the country feared him and wanted him gone. Jesus spoke, and a woman was healed and given peace. Jesus spoke, and a man had fear removed from him and gave him a sense of purpose to get Jesus to his daughter even faster than he was trying to before. Jesus spoke, and they laughed and scorned. Well, when Jesus speaks, how do you respond? These people who were wailing and bewailing weren't related to her. Maybe you aren't even related or know anything about the person that God's dealing with in this room, and all you see is them responding. All you see is what God spoke to somebody else. You still got to deal with the fact that you saw and you heard God speak, which means whether he spoke to somebody else or not, the mere fact that he spoke means he's speaking to you. But they responded by laughing to scorn, knowing that she was dead. And he put them all out and took her by the hand and called, saying, Maid, arise. English language is always fun. There's a commentator who would have translated this little lamb, who would have described this as the spiritual father would say little lamb, just like a human father would say little daughter. Maid, a little precious one who is mine. Arise. So just like Judas has spoken to the demons and they fled, Judas spoke to the countrymen and they feared and demanded that he leave. He spoke to the demoniac and he begged him to stay. He spoke to the young woman and she was given peace. Spoke to the father and he was given a promise. Spoke to the wailers and they mocked him to scorn. Now he's finally speaking to the daughter. And she goes from being dead to being alive. And her spirit came again. And that's enough reason for all the Sadducees to want to kill him, because they don't believe that there's an afterlife. They would have believed that, no, this is it. But she had died, so her spirit went somewhere. And now her spirit's coming back. Fortunately, she's not all wrapped up like Lazarus was in the tomb. Jesus doesn't have to say, well, go release the guy, please, No, don't let him just be sitting there wrapped up in the linens like a mummy, not being able to move. No, he doesn't have to deal with that. She's just right there. Opens her eyes, pops right up. And her spirit came again, and she arose straightway. And he had commanded to give her meat. And her parents were astonished. But he charged them that they should tell no man what was done. And it's amazing how he'd always tell people not to say what he did, and somehow everybody finds out what he did. You wonder how that works. He says that because from his perspective of what it's time for people to know about or not. Not because he's trying to torture them into silence. Not because he doesn't know that everybody's going to find out anyway, but because it's more about him interacting with individuals than him becoming the one who raises babies. Because it was more about him interacting with this young girl and that resulting in her being raised than him just being the sideshow attraction that raises from the dead. It's much more important for him to be the one who spoke and healed to this young woman of torment for oppression for 12 years and be the one that healed her than to be the sideshow attraction that heals. It's much more important for him to speak and you to hear, for him to speak and you to be affected. And have you noticed that there is not a direct correlation between being affected by his speech and your response? That you can fear and cast him out and still have the demoniac set free. The girl was still raised and they laughed him to scorn. The question is not, does he speak? The question is not, is he effective when he speaks? The question is, how do you respond when he does? Because he comes in and he sets the captive free. He comes in and he heals the sick. He comes in and cleans the unclean and restores them and makes them whole. He comes in and raises from the dead. He comes in and takes care of all of the destruction of the curse and all of the destruction of and death and hell and all of it. And he does that through the personal interaction between him and each and every individual. But he's not going to take charge of how you respond to him. He's going to let you respond to him the same, however it is that you're going to respond, whether it is fear, whether it is affectionate embrace, or whether it is mocking him to scorn, your response is going to be yours. So how do you respond to it? Maybe you're somebody who is, maybe you're not quite, maybe you might be 12, but you've not quite gotten the conviction. We just see it coming and know that you've got parents that are praying for you. Maybe it's that you are right there, and even as I've been praying, you've been convicted in a way that's just different than the guilt you felt before. Oh, God will, you just come to him in simple faith and he'll save you. Maybe you've been in church all your life, or you've not been in church at all, but you've just been overwhelmed not just by sin, but you've been oppressed by the consequences of sin in your life, and your life has been a series of one isolation after another, one getting somewhat close to somebody and then it being torn away from you, and you being just by yourself again, and all of the ways that you try to overcome your own sin just seems to make you more distant and more lonely and more isolated, and the specific consequences of every sin just hit harder and harder each time, and you know that sin's taken away what should have been the most precious time of your life away from you. But he speaks to you not just to heal what was taken away from you, but to know that he sees you, and the peace he has for you comes from him to you. Not just this generic healing, but a personal, applied healing, so that you might know that you're not just healed, but you're his. And you might be somebody who's seen all this walk along, and you're having to face the fact that you're reacting more against this Savior than you are for. Yeah. Well, some get saved by love, and some get saved by fear and pulling them out of the fire. Maybe you're closer to the fire today than you ever realized you were before. If you're alive today, there's still hope. Maybe you're one of those people who sees what he does, hears what he says, and know that you know better, and you mock him to scorn. Oh, the cry goes forth to repent and believe the gospel. Humble yourself, lest he humble you. Because those who reject the head of the corner are crushed by it. Yeah. But their parents were astonished, and he charged them they should tell no man what was done. And as he goes away, they know they've been visited by God. And every time they see their daughter, they're going to know Jesus loves me.
Thank you so much for joining us for this video message from Grace Baptist Tabernacle. I pray it's been a real blessing to you in your walk with Jesus. I want to invite you once again, reach out to us. Let us know how we can be praying for you and how we can be a blessing to you in your walk with Jesus. gbtministries.com. You've got phone numbers and email. Please do reach out to us. Let us know how we can be praying for you. Blessed to be standing on a construction site right now, and we are looking forward to seeing a building go up here. This is going to be our first building that we've ever had as a church. We're really, really thankful to Jesus for that. And I want to invite you also in the interim while the construction is going on, please do feel welcome to come and visit us in person. We would love to meet you. gbtministries.com has our service locations and our service times, and look forward to meeting you, and may the Lord richly bless you.